71 degrees below zero. It's a temperature where steel shatters like glass and lungs bleed if you breathe too deep. Martha thought she knew the cold until the night the pack found her. But just as the teeth of the alpha wolf grazed her throat, something massive emerged from the whiteout, something that shouldn't have been there at all. The silence of the Siberian taiga is not empty. It is heavy. It presses against the eardrums, a physical weight composed of millions of tons of snow and ice. For Martha Higgins, a 72-year-old retired glaciologist who had traded the noise of Chicago for the desolate beauty of the Sakha Republic 3 decades ago, this silence was usually a comfort. But tonight, it felt like a predator holding its breath. Martha stood on the porch of her reinforced timber cabin, situated 30 miles north of Oymyakon, widely known as the Pole of Cold. She squinted at the outdoor thermometer encased in heavy-duty plastic. The mercury had vanished past the markings. The digital backup inside the window read 64 degrees Celsius, 83.2 degrees Fahrenheit. "It's dropping, Bruno," she whispered to the heavy-set Alaskan Malamute sitting beside her. The dog whined, his thick fur bristling as he stared into the dark tree line. In Yakutia, they call it the whispering of the stars, the soft, tinkering sound made when moisture in a person's exhalation freezes instantly and falls to the ground as ice dust. Martha heard that sound now with every breath she took. She pulled her reindeer fur shapka tighter around her ears. She wasn't supposed to be outside, but the generator in the shed had sputtered and died 20 minutes ago. Without power, the electric heaters aimed at the cabin's pipes would fail. If the pipes burst, the house would flood and freeze within the hour, turning her sanctuary into an ice tomb. "Stay," she commanded Bruno, gripping the handle of a heavy wrench. She stepped off the porch. The snow crunched under her boots like breaking bones. The generator shed was only 50 yards away, but at these temperatures, 50 yards was a tactical migration. The air was thick, almost soupy with ice fog. Martha moved methodically. Panic increased heart rate. Increased heart rate meant sweating. Sweat meant death. She reached the shed, her fingers stiff inside triple-layered mittens. She wrestled the door open and shone her flashlight on the old diesel beast. A fuel line had cracked the rubber, couldn't handle the extreme drop in temperature. It was a simple fix, but one that required dexterity she didn't possess in these mittens. She had to take them off. 10 seconds, she told herself. "You have 10 seconds." She stripped the mitten from her right hand. The cold bit immediately, a searing burn that felt like fire, not ice. She worked frantically with the tape and the clamp. 5 seconds. Her fingers turned waxy and white. 8 seconds. She tightened the screw. 10 seconds. She couldn't feel the wrench anymore. She jammed her hand back into the mitten, gasping in pain as blood rushed back into the freezing capillaries. She hit the starter. The generator coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life. "Good girl," she muttered, patting the machine. She turned to head back to the cabin, eager for a cup of tea and the safety of her wood stove. That was when she heard it. It wasn't the wind. It was a howl, high-pitched, jagged, and terrifyingly close. Bruno was barking frantically from the porch. Martha's flashlight beam cut through the ice fog, swinging toward the tree line. 2 yellow eyes reflected the light. Then 2 more. Then 6. Timber wolves. But these weren't the skittish scavengers that usually avoided human settlements. These were gaunt, desperate beasts driven mad by the harshest winter in 50 years. The local reindeer herds had moved south weeks ago, leaving the predators starving. Martha took a step toward the house. A gray blur shot out from the shadows near the woodpile. "Bruno, no!" she screamed. The Malamute, protective and foolish, had leaped off the porch to intercept the wolf flanking her. The 2 animals collided in a spray of snow. Bruno was big, but the wolf was quicker. It snapped at his neck, driving him back toward the dense forest. "Bruno!" Without thinking, Martha grabbed the shovel leaning against the shed and ran. She didn't run toward the safety of her cabin. She ran into the dark, following the sounds of snarling and yelping. She knew the rules of the taiga. Never leave the perimeter. But Bruno was the only family she had left since her husband, Arthur, passed away 5 years ago. He was the only living thing that looked at her with recognition. She crested a small ridge, winded, her chest burning. The fight had moved. She could see the tracks in the snow, smeared with red, leading down into the valley toward the frozen Indigirka River. She checked her pockets. No flare gun, no rifle. Just a wrench, a shovel, and the clothes on her back. And the temperature was dropping. The meteorological station in town would later confirm that a pocket of supercooled air had settled over the valley floor that night, pushing the temperature to a historic 71 degrees Celsius, 95.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Martha took a step down the slope. The wind picked up, erasing her footprints seconds after she made them. She was walking into the abyss. 20 minutes into the valley, the cold stopped hurting. That was the most dangerous stage. The body, realizing it could no longer heat the extremities, pulled all blood to the core. Martha's feet felt like wooden blocks. She stumbled frequently, unable to feel the terrain beneath her boots. She found Bruno a mile from the cabin, near a cluster of jagged rocks that jutted out of the snow like broken teeth. The dog was lying on his side, whining softly. His flank was torn, staining the pristine snow crimson. "Oh, buddy," Martha croaked. Her voice sounded strange, thin and brittle. Her lips were beginning to freeze together. She fell to her knees beside him. The wolf pack was nowhere to be seen, but she could feel them. They were watching, calculating. She tried to lift Bruno, but he was 80 pounds of dead weight, and she was a 2-year-old woman running on adrenaline and fading hope. She couldn't carry him back up the ridge, not in this snow, not against this wind. She looked around desperately. The rock formation offered a small crevice, a semi-cave protected from the wind on 3 sides. It wasn't much, but it was better than the open exposure. "Come on," she grunted, grabbing Bruno's collar. She dragged him inch by inch into the crevice. She positioned herself at the opening. The shovel held like a spear. She checked her watch. The LCD display was sluggish, fading in and out. 2 a.m. Dawn wouldn't break for another 8 hours. The first hallucination started 10 minutes later. She saw Arthur standing in the snow, wearing his favorite flannel shirt, no coat, no hat. He was holding a mug of steaming coffee. "Come inside, Martha," he said, his voice warm and clear. "It's toasty by the fire." Martha shook her head violently, ice crystals flying from her eyelashes. "You're dead, Arthur," she slurred. "Go away." She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. The pain grounded her. She had to stay awake. If she slept, she died. A low growl snapped her back to reality. They had returned. Emerging from the ice fog like ghosts, the wolves formed a semicircle around the rock crevice. There were 5 of them now. The alpha, a massive male with a scar running down his left eye, stepped forward. He didn't look aggressive. He looked patient. He knew the cold was doing the work for him. He just had to wait for the meat to stop moving. Martha swung the shovel. "Back! Get back!" The effort made her dizzy. The alpha didn't flinch. He sat down in the snow, 10 feet away, and licked his paws. The standoff lasted for what felt like hours, though it might have been only minutes. The cold was insidious. It seeped through her reindeer fur, through the down layers, through the wool, touching her skin with the kiss of necrosis. Her vision began to tunnel. Then, the attack began. It wasn't a frenzy, it was a probe. One of the smaller wolves darted in from the left. Martha swung the shovel, catching it on the shoulder. It yelped and retreated, but the effort threw Martha off balance. She slipped on the ice, falling hard onto her hip. The alpha saw the opening. He didn't growl. He simply launched himself. Martha raised her arm to protect her throat. The wolf's jaws clamped onto her forearm. The thick layers of fur and wool protected her skin from being punctured immediately, but the crushing pressure was immense. She screamed. A sound that was swallowed instantly by the vast emptiness of the tundra. She kicked at the beast, but he was an anchor of muscle and sinew. The other wolves, emboldened, began to close in. One snapped at her boots. Another lunged for Bruno, who was too weak to stand. "No," Martha sobbed, striking the alpha's snout with her free hand. It was like hitting a stone. She was going to die here. She was going to be torn apart while her blood froze before it hit the ground. She looked at the Alpha's yellow eyes and saw no malice, only hunger. This was nature, cruel, efficient, inevitable. The Alpha tightened his grip, shaking his head to tear through the layers of her coat. Martha's vision went black at the edges. She slumped back against the rock, her strength evaporating. "I'm sorry, Bruno," she thought. "I'm so sorry." And then, the ground shook. It wasn't a tremor. It was a rhythmic, heavy thudding that vibrated through the ice and into Martha's spine. Thud, thud, thud. The Alpha wolf froze. He released Martha's arm and spun around, his ears flattened against his skull. The other wolves whimpered, their tails tucking between their legs. They backed away, their eyes fixed on the ridge above the rock formation. Martha, gasping for air, looked up. At first, she thought it was another hallucination, a trick of the moonlight and the ice fog, because what she saw was impossible. Standing on the ridge, silhouetted against the faint aurora borealis that had just begun to shimmer green across the sky, was a monster. It stood on its hind legs, towering nearly 10 feet tall. Its fur was not the gray of the timber wolves, but a creamy, yellowish white that blended perfectly with the snow. It let out a roar, not a howl, but a guttural, earth-shaking roar that sounded like ice sheets cracking apart. A polar bear. Here. 300 miles inland from the coast. It was biologically impossible. It was a geographical anomaly. But as the massive creature dropped to all fours and slid down the embankment with terrifying speed, Martha realized that impossibilities didn't matter when you were staring them in the face. The bear didn't look at Martha. It looked at the wolves. It was an apex predator, interrupting a meal, or perhaps clearing its territory. The Alpha wolf snarled, standing his ground. It was a fatal mistake. The polar bear covered the distance in 3 strides. It moved with a fluid, liquid grace that belied its immense bulk. The wolf lunged. The bear swatted. It was a casual backhand, a motion almost lazy in its execution. The impact sent the 100-pound wolf flying 20 feet through the air. It hit a tree with a sickening crunch and did not move again. The remaining wolves didn't wait. They scattered into the darkness, yelping in terror. Silence rushed back into the valley, heavier than before. Martha pressed herself against the cold rock, clutching the shivering Bruno. She was alone with the white giant. The bear turned slowly, its massive head swinging toward the crevice. Its snout was black as coal, twitching as it scented the air. It took a step toward her. Then another. Martha closed her eyes. She had been saved from the pack only to be delivered to the king. "Please," she whispered, though she didn't know who she was asking. The bear stopped. It was close enough that she could smell it, a pungent mix of musk, old blood, and sea salt. She felt its hot breath, a steam engine in the frozen night, wash over her face. She opened her eyes. The bear was staring right at her. Intelligence burned in those dark eyes. It didn't roar. It didn't attack. It lowered its massive head, sniffing her boot, then Bruno's bloodied flank. Then, it did something that defies every textbook on animal behavior. It sat down. It sat down in the snow, creating a wall of fur and heat between Martha and the open valley. It turned its back to her, facing the darkness where the wolves had fled, effectively blocking the wind and standing guard. Martha stared at the creature's broad back, trembling uncontrollably. She didn't understand, but as the heat radiating from the 1,000-pound animal began to reach her freezing face, she realized she didn't need to understand. She just needed to survive the night, and the night was far from over. The concept of time vanishes when the core body temperature drops below 35 degrees Celsius, 95 degrees Fahrenheit. There is only the rhythm of shivering and the encroaching darkness of the mind. Martha sat huddled in the crevice of the rock, her knees pulled to her chest, her arms wrapped tightly around the unconscious body of Bruno. But the dog's heat was fading. He was becoming a block of ice in her arms. 5 feet away, the polar bear sat like a monolith. The wind howled around the edges of the rock formation, a screaming banshee of the tundra, but the bear's massive bulk acted as a windbreak. The creature was a biological furnace. Even from this distance, Martha could feel the faint radiation of its body heat, a tease of life in the kingdom of death. She knew she had a choice to make. The physics of the situation were absolute. If she stayed against the rock, she would fall asleep within the hour and never wake up. If she moved toward the bear, she risked being mauled by an apex predator that viewed humans as little more than slow seals. "Arthur would tell me to take the risk," she mumbled, her speech slurring heavily. Arthur always liked the odds. She dragged herself forward. The snow under her legs felt like crushed glass. She moved inch by inch, dragging Bruno with her. The bear's head swiveled. The movement was heavy, distinct. Its black eyes, void of any white sclera, locked onto her. It let out a huff, a sound like a collapsing lung. It smelled of raw meat and ancient, wet musk. Martha froze. She was 3 feet away. "I'm cold," she whispered, tears freezing instantly on her cheeks. Just cold. She closed the gap. She pressed her back against the bear's flank. She expected a roar. She expected the swipe of a paw that would take her head off. Instead, she felt the coarse, hollow guard hairs of the bear's coat. Beneath them was the dense underwool, and beneath that, 4 inches of blubber and massive muscle radiating a steady, powerful heat. The bear didn't move. It shifted its weight slightly, grunting low in its throat, but it didn't push her away. It accepted her presence with the indifference of a god. Martha pulled Bruno in, sandwiching the injured dog between her chest and the bear's back. For the first time in hours, the shivering began to subside. The heat was intoxicating. It was life. As the adrenaline faded, memories began to intrude, fragmented and vivid. She remembered a conference in Fairbanks in 1999. She remembered meeting Dr. Richard Sterling, a specialist in Ursine migration. He had told her over whiskey that polar bears were changing. "They are walking ghosts, Martha," he had said. "When the ice goes, they will walk south. They will walk until they find food or until they die. And they will stop fearing us because hunger overrides fear." Was this hunger, or was it something else? Around 4 a.m., the wolves returned. Martha felt the bear tense against her back. The muscles coiled like steel cables. She opened her heavy eyelids to see the shadows slinking at the edge of the visual field. They were testing the perimeter again. The bear didn't stand up this time. It simply lifted its head and let out a sound that Martha felt in her own ribcage, a low, vibrating rumble that was below the range of human hearing but triggered a primal dread in every mammal within a mile radius. It was a warning. Mine. The shadows vanished. The bear laid its head back down on its paws. Martha drifted. She wasn't sleeping. She was hovering in the gray space between consciousness and coma. She hallucinated that the bear was Arthur. He was wearing a white fur coat, sitting with his back to her at a bus stop in Chicago. "Bus is late," Arthur said. "No," Martha replied in her mind. "I can't walk, Martha. My legs are frozen." She woke with a start. The sky was changing. The pitch black was turning to a bruised purple. Dawn. But with the dawn came the realization of her condition. She couldn't feel her feet. She couldn't feel her hands. Frostbite had claimed her extremities. She tried to move her fingers to grip Bruno's fur, but they were unresponsive claws. The bear shifted. It stood up. The loss of heat was instantaneous and brutal. Martha gasped, falling sideways into the snow where the bear had been. "No, don't go," she croaked. The bear shook itself, sending a cloud of ice crystals into the air. It looked down at her one last time. In the growing light, Martha saw something she had missed in the dark. On the bear's right ear, there was a yellow plastic tag. It was faded, scratched, and almost covered by fur. But it was there. G7. It wasn't a spirit. It wasn't a guardian angel. It was Subject G7, a monitored animal. The bear turned its massive head toward the ridge. It sniffed the air, then looked back at the dead wolf carcass. It grabbed the wolf in its jaws, lifting the 100-pound animal as easily as a rag doll, and began to walk away toward the frozen river. It was taking its breakfast to go. "Wait," Martha cried out, but her voice was a whisper. The bear didn't look back. It crested the ridge and vanished into the whiteout, leaving Martha alone with a dying dog and the silence of the grave. Martha knew she had about 20 minutes before the ambient temperature, still hovering around 68 degrees Celsius, finished what the night had started. She curled around Bruno. "Wake up, buddy. Please." The dog let out a shallow breath. He was alive, but barely. Martha closed her eyes. She was ready. She had fought the wolves. She had survived the night. She had slept against a polar bear. It was a good story. It was a hell of a story to take to the other side. Then, she heard it. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the whispering stars. It was the high-pitched whine of a two-stroke engine. Ree, ree, ree. Snowmobiles. Martha tried to shout, but her throat was frozen shut. She tried to wave, but her arms wouldn't lift. The sound grew louder. It was coming from the ridge. Suddenly, a figure appeared on the crest, the same spot where the bear had stood. But this wasn't a monster. It was a man in a bright orange thermal suit. He stopped his machine, standing up and scanning the valley with binoculars. It was Pyotr, her nearest neighbor, a Yakut reindeer herder who lived 40 miles south. He scanned the valley floor. He looked right past the rocks. He couldn't see her. She was buried in snow, white on white. "Look at the blood," she screamed in her mind. "Look at the wolf blood." Pyotr was turning the snowmobile around. He was leaving. Martha summoned every ounce of energy remaining in her dying cells. She couldn't scream. She couldn't wave. She grabbed the metal whistle attached to the zipper of her parka. It was frozen to the fabric. She brought her face down to it, capturing it between her lips. The metal tore the skin of her lips, instantly bonding to the flesh. She didn't care. She blew. A weak, shrill tweet cut through the air. Pyotr stopped. He turned his head. She blew again. Long, hard, desperate. Pyotr pointed. Then he waved. 2 other snowmobiles appeared behind him. They gunned their engines, racing down the slope in a spray of powder. When Pyotr reached her, he fell to his knees, his face pale with shock. "Martha! Bose moi! My God!" he shouted, pulling off his gloves to check her pulse. "We saw the generator smoke stop. We came as soon as the light broke." "Bear," Martha whispered, her lips bleeding. "Polar. Bear." Pyotr looked at his companions. They exchanged worried glances. They thought she was delirious. Freezing people often spoke nonsense in the end. Yes, bear," Pyotr said soothingly, wrapping her in an emergency thermal blanket. "We get you warm now." "No," Martha insisted, her eyes wild. "Look," she motioned with her chin toward the snow. Pyotr looked down. There, pressed into the hard-packed snow, were massive prints the size of dinner plates, and in the center of the area, a large depression where the snow had been melted and refrozen into a bowl of ice the shape of a sleeping giant. And leading away from the site, the drag marks of the wolf carcass. Pyotr's eyes went wide. He stood up and followed the tracks with his gaze. "A white bear? Here? It is impossible." "Saved. Me," Martha wheezed. The rescue was a blur of noise and heat. They loaded Bruno onto a sled, wrapping him in wool. They strapped Martha to a stretcher. 3 days later, in the intensive care unit of the Republican Hospital in Yakutsk, Dr. Izmailov stood at the foot of Martha's bed. Her hands were bandaged heavily. She would lose 2 toes on her left foot and the tip of her right pinky finger, but she would keep her hands. "You are a very lucky woman, Mrs. Higgins," the doctor said. "Another 10 minutes, and your heart would have stopped." "How is Bruno?" Martha asked, her voice raspy. "The dog is stable. He required 30 stitches, but he is eating." Martha nodded, looking out the window at the gray sky. "Did you find out about the tag? G7? The doctor hesitated. He opened a folder in his hands. "We contacted the Wildlife Research Institute in St. Petersburg. They confirmed the tag. And G7 is a male polar bear. He was tagged 4 years ago in the Chukchi Sea. That is over 700 miles from where you were found." "Why was he there?" "The researchers say his tracking collar malfunctioned 2 months ago. They thought he was dead. But the doctor paused, looking at the report with disbelief. The data suggests he has been following a specific migration of reindeer that moved inland due to the ice melt. He wasn't lost, Martha. He was hunting. He wasn't hunting me, Martha said softly. No. The doctor agreed. The report says G7 has a history. In 2021, he was observed near a weather station. He never attacked the scientists. He simply watched. They call him the Watchman. Martha closed her eyes. She could still feel the phantom heat of the bear's fur against her back. In the most hostile environment on Earth, where the air itself tries to kill you, a creature of pure instinct had made a choice. It had chosen to share its warmth. The pack had wanted to consume her. The bear had simply wanted to not be alone in the dark. When I get out of here, Martha said, opening her eyes, I'm buying a new generator. A bigger one. And a gun? The doctor asked. Martha smiled, a cracked, painful smile. No. I think I'm covered. Martha's survival wasn't just luck. It was a miraculous intersection of nature's cruelty and its strange, unexpected mercy. In the frozen heart of Yakutia, a predator became a protector, proving that even at 71 degrees Celsius, life finds a way to defy the odds. The Watchman is still out there, wandering the white abyss. Perhaps, in the silence of the taiga, no one is truly ever alone. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. I post true survival stories and unexplained mysteries every week. What do you think? Did the bear know he was saving her, or was she just a heat source? Let me know your theory in the comments below. Stay warm, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.